April 30th has come and gone, the second anniversary of my first upload, a review of Final Fantasy VII Remake, the game that I thought about so often, even in the weeks after finishing it, I had to start making YouTube videos just to put my thoughts out there for someone, anyone, to hear me, because I think my friends were starting to get exhausted. I won't go into detail about that video or the ones immediately following it, because I already made a Year 1 recap last year. This video is going to be about Year 2, from May 2021 to April 30th, 2022, and there's a few things to talk about. Even though it doesn't fall into the relevant timeline, my What is Survival Horror video got a lot more attention since the previous recap. In last year's video, I lamented that it was taking a long time for it to get any attention, and admittedly it did bother me a lot at the time because it was, and still is honestly, the video I am most proud of. But it got a second wind thanks to a couple different factors, specifically a bit of algorithm help and fellow YouTuber Under the Mayo directing people to the video from his own video discussing the same subject. It was the first time, as far as I know, that a much bigger channel gave me a shoutout, and I am extremely grateful. Over time, the video got enough views and positive reception that I am no longer disappointed by it being overlooked, as it's now one of the most viewed videos on the channel. It also reinforced that it was a good idea for me to have a personal recommendations playlist featuring what I consider to be my best videos. It is by far the most viewed playlist out of the few that I have, so creating it seems to have been a good idea. Sometimes you come across a channel and you aren't sure what their best content is, so you may assume that it's the most viewed ones, when in fact the creator might feel otherwise, but they don't really have any way of conveying that. I wanted to cut through any assumptions like that and just straight up make a list of videos that I think new viewers should check out, and it seems to be helping. Picking up where last year's video left off, I kicked off my second year of video creation with 2 reviews of games that I ended up loving, Returnal and Resident Evil Village. It was a 1-2 punch of awesome experiences. Both games ended up in my top 5 of 2021. Returnal was just an amazing game, and I can't overstate how glad I am that it exists. It's not a perfect game, but goddamn do I love the fact that a AAA bullet hell game truly exists, and that it exists in this specific manner. I love it. Village was a small point of contention for some people within the Resident Evil fanbase, but honestly, this is one of those franchises that's been around for so long and has so many games that are so different from each other, it's almost impossible to make a mainline entry that doesn't aggravate or at least disappoint a few individuals. It's just one of those things. After that, I made 2 videos about the re-release of Virtua Fighter 5, this new version dubbed Ultimate Showdown. First is my review where I expressed my general enjoyment of Virtua Fighter games and how glad I am that Ultimate Showdown exists. It looks great, feels great, sounds great, and it was technically free to own if you were already playing for PlayStation Plus, which many fighting game players already do. The biggest issue with the game right now is its lack of single-player content and the online netcode, because we're entering an era of rollback becoming the standard. But VF5 is stubbornly ignoring it. No doubt thanks in part to Katsuhiro Harada whispering in the producer's ear about how rollback isn't that great, like the guy that he is. My second video is about the game's future, because the producer straight up admits that Ultimate Showdown's success dictates the future of the franchise, which made a lot of people worry because it caused flashbacks to Capcom's Darkstalkers test, where they released a barely marketed remaster of the Darkstalkers games and acted like there was no interest after it failed to hit an unspecified amount of sales. Capcom was truly unrepentant shit back then. But thankfully, Sega has spoken positively about Ultimate Showdown's success, so it seems to have passed. Then we continue my obsession with Final Fantasy VII Remake. The PS5 version, Intergrade, released, and instead of saving money by simply upgrading my PS4 version and buying the Yuffie update separately, I went all the way to buy a new physical copy, and I do not regret it. Intergrade was indeed a fantastic update. The game was already beautiful before, considering it ran on 7-year-old hardware that already wasn't very impressive back in 2013. But the new update made it truly gorgeous, and the photo mode was alright. A bit restrictive, but you could use it during cutscenes, which was cool. But of course, the big deal with Intergrade was the new Yuffie DLC, which gave us a never-before-seen look at what the character was doing before her eventual meeting with the main group. In the original, she's an optional character, but it's clear as day that Square was never going to let that be the case this time around, and I'm honestly glad for it. Yuffie got a lot of characterization in her intermission chapter, and they really did her personality justice. She acts exactly like the cocky teenager she is. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The most important thing about the remake to me is how the characters are treated. Literally, nothing else about the game could change, but if the main cast were less likable, I would probably hate it. But they're amazing. They're exactly how I imagined them when I was just a kid. That was my review of Intergrade, and similar to what I did with the base game when it first released in 2020, I made a second video, a spoiler discussion. And just like my videos on the base game, the spoiler discussion ended up being longer than the review, but I guess that's to be expected. I know some people despise the fact that Final Fantasy VII Remake is deviating from the original's plot points, but like I've said multiple times before in other videos, I actually love that. I love the fact that I don't know what's going to happen anymore in this 25-year-old story that I and everyone else knew. I love the fact that people are theory crafting like it's Metal Gear Solid. That was one of my favorite aspects of being a Metal Gear fan, deciphering the mystery before the next game was even revealed, or at least attempting to. The stinger at the end of Yuffie's DLC answered few questions and instead raised more, and my head's gonna be spinning with a bunch of weird shit until Part 2 is finally out, hopefully within the next year and a half or so. E3 2021 happened, and while it wasn't exactly great, I still honestly kinda preferred it over the summer of 30 different shows that I didn't care about back in 2020. Unfortunately, E3's gone this year too, and it seems individual publishers and Jeff Keighley will have to pick up the slack yet again. Then I reviewed Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, another game that ended up in my top 5 of that year. It just really satisfied me as a long-time Ratchet & Clank fan. I'd say it's my second favorite game in the series now, behind only Up Your Arsenal. It's just really fun, really charming, and really beautiful, visually and audibly. Fantastic game. Next up is another video that eventually got picked up by the algorithm and led to another big blow up in views and subscribers. A Song of Promise and Disaster, my Game of Thrones rant video. Yeah, I know, it was 2 years late to the rant party and my video is just one of many like this from other channels, but a lot of people who felt particularly spurned by Season 8's shittiness won't really care. It's a pain that doesn't go away easily and is best tolerated with others. For 2 whole years I kept thinking about the show's end and how much it disappointed me. I had been watching since day 1 back in 2011 when the first season premiered, so this was a slow burn for me. I figured I could put all of my thoughts into a video and finally put it behind me, so I started working on the script for this way back in January. And as the months passed, its length ballooned to the point where I just had to release it before it became too much. It ended up just shy of 44 minutes, but I'm sure I could have found a way to make it a full hour if I let my thoughts stew a bit longer. But I must confess that finally putting Game of Thrones behind me wasn't the only reason for this video's existence. I also knew the subject would get snatched up by YouTube's algorithm sooner or later, and I was right. 3 weeks after I published it, it exploded, because I think another bigger channel released a rant video of its own, which led to people finding mine. Either way, releasing the video was pretty therapeutic, and helped me think about the show's abysmal end much less often. After that, I made a short video about Ubisoft, because I felt like their shameless, habitual trend chasing and franchise hunting was getting out of hand, and I wanted to complain about it. Unfortunately, they seem to have gotten only worse since then, but hey, what can you do? Following that, I made a second video about piracy, this time about DRM and the concept of lost sales, both of which have always stuck to me as egregious and dishonest, because DRM almost always hurts legitimate consumers more than pirates. and lost sales is just a blatant lie made up by corporations to demonize piracy. As you can see, I have a lot to say about the subject. Then I made a video about how much I liked the idea of Battlefield 2042 having AI bots, because one of the most annoying things about Battlefield games is finding a game with a rule set you like that's actually populated, and bots are a great way to get around it. Sadly, the game released and ended up being not so good, so it didn't really matter if bots existed or not. However, the day this video went up was also the day my new full-time job started. Fun fact. Then I did a video where I talk about the rumors of Toshihiro Nagoshi, the creator of the Yakuza franchise, leaving Sega for NetEase, which actually ended up being true. He left to establish his new studio with a few other people from the Ryogakutoku studio team right behind him. People panicked over this because they thought the Yakuza series would tank in quality now, but that's honestly ridiculous. RGG Studio is more than just Nagoshi, as important as he was. After that, I reviewed 2 more games back to back, Tales of Arise and Lost Judgment. The former I liked overall, but man, I didn't like how combat felt when I was actually fighting enemies. They had no reaction to attacks, which made me feel weak, and it just seemed like I was whacking tanky, spongy MMO raid bosses for 40 straight hours. And that's in spite of the actual combat controls feeling really nice. Hopefully the next Tales game goes back to its previous mechanics. Even if it does mean that you can easily stunlock enemies to death, at least I felt strong and cool while doing it. Lost Judgment was another fantastic game I loved a lot, and another that ended up in my top 5. It just feels like an improvement over the first game in almost every way, and the first game was also great, so that says a lot. Then I made 2 big, long videos that took a long time to put together. First is Prey Return, which is my little retrospective on my experience with Final Fantasy XIV, which may very well be my favorite game of all time now. I never expected myself to love an MMO this much, but here we are. Prey Return was the first video to go over an hour in length on my channel, and honestly I should have made it longer. It wasn't until a short time after publishing that I realized there was a ton of other things I didn't touch on about my experience with the game, particularly major story beats across the expansions. Truth be told, I'm a bit disappointed with how I rushed it, but maybe it's for the best, because if I didn't reel myself in, it probably would have been closer to 2 hours instead. After that was an even longer video, 1998, the greatest year in gaming, a title I do stand by, though there are a couple other years that are arguably just as good. 1998 was seriously a landmark year, and many of the most famous franchises and genres we know today were created, defined, or redefined in this year. Plus, the Unreal Engine was unleashed upon the world as well in the form of the game Unreal. I am interested in making videos about other years, particularly 2001 and 2004, but we'll see how that goes. Later, my most anticipated game of the year finally released, an expansion for an MMO. That's right, Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. Funny thing, I actually took a week off of my new job in order to dedicate all 7 days to this, but then it got delayed by 2 weeks and I couldn't reschedule my vacation time. I won't lie, I was a little bit irritated, but I wasn't surprised. And yoshi-p, being the awesome guy he is, acknowledged that a lot of players did the exact same thing I did and apologized for messing up vacations. I can't stay mad at him. He gave me my favorite game. And god damn, what a good expansion Endwalker ended up being. It made the delay worth it. It made all annoying queue and login issues worth it. It was just a fucking dream of a finale for the first saga of Final Fantasy XIV. It was the best way to end my year. Speaking of ending my year, I decided to actually end it with my first proper trip into VR by buying a Quest 2. It was a worthwhile purchase because I grabbed some great games that knew how to take advantage of the medium, especially Resident Evil VR. I loved it. It made a game I've played many times before even more fun, and that's a hell of an accomplishment. I also bought a link cable so I could use the PC VR games too, so I've been doing a bit of that as well. My PC isn't particularly powerful, but it does the job well enough. Then I started my new year on a less enthusiastic note with a rant video on NFTs. I tried hard to ignore the subject because I found it annoying, but no matter how hard I tried, I felt like I couldn't avoid it, because they were just being pushed in the most obnoxious and unnatural way imaginable. So I reached the end of my patience and made a 32-minute video of me verbally abusing the concept and anyone who pushes it. Thankfully, NFTs seemed to have tanked in popularity over the last few months, and I hope to God they do not rebound. And if I'm being honest, I thought it was really clever and funny on my part to use Ape Escape gameplay as background footage. Just saying. After that, another money-related topic became widely discussed across the video game community: acquisitions. Microsoft shook the industry overnight by acquiring one of the biggest behemoths around, Activision Blizzard, for a gargantuan $68.7 billion, mere months after acquiring Bethesda. And not long after that, in a twist of fate, Sony acquired the formerly Microsoft-owned studio, Bungie. And both console manufacturers promised us that we'll be seeing even more acquisitions as the year continued. This sparked a big debate about industry consolidation and potential oligopolies. But I don't think it's at a dire situation just yet, but it's a topic worth keeping in mind for the foreseeable future. Then I played and reviewed Sifu, which is a great little game with a lot of heart and addicting combat. One of the major criticisms I had against it was the disappointing and honestly borderline useless practice mode. However, the most recent Sifu content update as of publishing this video expanded practice mode to the very extent I wished it had. Slowclap very obviously took this criticism to heart and decided it was indeed for the best to give everyone a more robust way of training, and for free. That's really appreciated. Speaking of training modes, Street Fighter VI was also formally announced after about a year or so of rumors suggesting it was already in active development. I made a video detailing my hopes and concerns about the game, specifically the worries that the first year or two will be a repeat of the first 2 years of Street Fighter V. If you don't recall, it was a very, very dark time to be a Street Fighter fan then. The game was absolutely not in a good place, and it took 2 years for us to get a version of the game that we really should have gotten back in 2016. So here's hoping Capcom learned from their mistakes. And then, finally, we have the two big videos that have gotten me unequivocally the largest amount of attention on this platform so far: my Elden Ring review and open world analysis. In the review, I was pretty upfront about how much I didn't truly enjoy the general gameplay experience of Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, so I actually had tempered expectations for Elden Ring. As a matter of fact, I was pretty set on not reviewing it at all, but the game ended up being way better than I expected. The first several hours of my playthrough wasn't really enough to write home about, but once I began exploring more and picking up good weapons and ashes of war for my build, and learning how to properly fight in tandem with my spirit summons to overcome highly aggressive bosses, I begun to have an insane amount of fun. And what's more, I noticed that I never got tired of wandering around the game's massive map. This is a big deal to me because I'm someone who hates going back and forth between places I've already traveled to. So I'm an unrepentant fast travel abuser. But Elden Ring's world made me want to just wander around aimlessly. Very few open world games inspire this desire. Ghost of Tsushima and Red Dead Redemption 2 are the only recent ones that come to mind. Because of this, I knew I had to make an analysis video discussing at length why I loved the open world so much. It's beautiful, thoughtfully designed, stuffed with things to do and look at. It's just a brilliant new standard for how fantasy worlds should look and feel. Both of these videos got grabbed by YouTube's algorithm pretty much instantly. The moment I hit publish, I was reeling in views that normally took weeks to get, and that's if I ever got them at all. And before I knew it, I quickly closed the remaining gap to my first milestone, 1,000 subscribers. It took almost 2 full years to reach that number, but it finally happened, and it feels amazing. 2 years of writing scripts, capturing footage, and editing, and it's all beginning to truly pay off. I am very grateful. It was a really steep hill to climb. I never got a huge signal boost by a super famous creator, I never spent $1,000 on ads, or anything like that. I started my channel at 0 subscribers, made videos, posted them here and there on social media to little attention, but it eventually added up, and now we're here. While the Elden Ring review got a lot of attention in respect to my own sub count and general relevancy, it was the analysis video that truly blew up, getting more than double the views of the review. Before, my most viewed video was my Cyberpunk 2077 review, where I was actually extremely critical, the opposite of my thoughts on Elden Ring. But my open world analysis video now completely overshadows it. It now holds the channel record for most views, most comments, and most likes by a massive margin. I was very ecstatic to see such a positive reception to it, even though the audio mixing is kind of fucked up because I was honestly in a bit of a rush to get it out so I could take advantage of the momentum I got from my review. But yeah, I'm blown away by how much attention those two videos have gotten, not only for themselves but for my channel in general. Thank you for watching them and hitting the subscribe button after doing so. Seriously. And finally, the last video I made before the end of year 2, my top 5 games of 2021. Like I stated in the video, I'm just one guy with a new full-time job, so I have only so many hours in a week to reasonably dedicate to playing video games. But I did try to pick up as many as I could. Overall, I would say almost every single game I played in 2021 was one that I generally liked. I had very few disappointments. In fact, the only one that kinda stands out to me is probably Deathloop. And I would say a fairly big contributor to that was all the insanely high scores it got from published reviews. I played the game waiting for it to become that 9 or 10 out of 10 experience that I kept seeing other people rave about, but it just never came. I finished the game, and while I don't necessarily dislike it, there was nothing really about it that left much of an impression on me. Besides that, 2021 was a positive year. Now, I originally planned to get at least one more video out before this year to recap, but the universe had different plans for me. So back on April 29th, while I was on track to finishing a script for another video, I had surgery to get my gallbladder removed. Turns out I had big, nasty gallstones that I could not pass, and they risked causing an infection. And I was also in a lot of immense pain. So I went under the knife to just get the whole thing taken out of me. I had to suffer for 36 hours before my surgery actually started. Wasn't fun, wouldn't recommend it. Amusingly, I'm kind of paranoid of kidney stones, so I drink water all the time, but being the dumbass that I am, I never even considered my gallbladder. It's all kind of a blur now, but that's probably because of all the morphine I got pumped into me in order to manage the pain because it was the only thing that worked. So yeah, for the sake of your gallbladder, do try to eat healthily. Gallstones are not pleasant, especially when they're stuck inside of you. But yeah, that pretty much concludes my entire second year of making YouTube content. It's been a hell of a year, with lots of successes, and I look forward to the next. Whether you sub to me because of my Elden Ring videos, or you've been subbed for a while, I appreciate your support. Fingers crossed that the growth continues unabated. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.